Okay, I think we're going to get started. How does that sound? Everybody good? Thumbs up? Great. Well, welcome. My name is Marjorie Kaplan. I'm the co-director of the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center here at Rutgers University, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's Climate Academy, focusing on nature-based solutions for a changing climate here in New Jersey. I am joined by my co-director, Lucas Markson, who will be assisting me in monitoring your chat and questions for our distinguished panelists. Today's webinar is going to last until 1 o'clock. Other than today's presenters and our Rutgers team, you are all muted. So to communicate with us, please type your questions into the chat box. Please send your notes to panelists, so that ensures all of us working behind the scenes today will see your questions. We are recording today's webinar, and it will be available on the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center website, which we will put into the chat. And I think, Lucas, can you throw that in there for me? We've allocated time at the end to get to your questions. So again, put them in the chat. And I want to thank our colleague, Dr. Oliver Stringham, for his help with today's webinar. Today, we are very pleased and honored to have Janine Barr, an Ashland Spector from the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, Dr. Brooke Maslow, Assistant Professor in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Natural Resources, and Dr. Richard Lathrop, Professor in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Natural Resources. And so with that, I'd like to invite Ashland and Janine to kick off our webinar by discussing the recently published New Jersey Nature-Based Solutions Reference Guide. So take it away, Ashland and Janine.
Thanks, Marjorie. Hi, I'm Ashland Spector. My colleague and co-author Janine Barr will be discussing the New Jersey Nature-Based Solutions Planning, Implementation, and Monitoring Reference Guide that was published a few months ago. So we began this project in early 2024 in partnership with the Nature Conservancy New Jersey, who also provided financial support for this project and whom it would not be possible. As we discussed what this document should include, we thought a lot about guiding questions such as, are people using the right kind of nature-based solutions to address the hazards they're facing? And how hard is it for non-experts to find information on nature-based solutions? And so ultimately, that led us to three primary goals that are listed before you. One is that there is a ton of existing information out in the world on nature-based solutions, but we wanted to put this all in one place and tailored for people in New Jersey. Additionally, we wanted to identify and address existing gaps in knowledge around nature-based solution. One of the specific examples that you'll see in this guide is information on what a benefit cost analysis is and how to do this for nature-based solutions. And of course, the largest goal overall is we wanted to empower more people in New Jersey to apply for nature-based solution project funding, receive it, and get these projects in the ground. So to create this document, we not only pulled hundreds of resources and publications from online, but we also directly engaged subject matter experts from the local, state, federal levels, and from the private, nonprofit, and public sectors so we could include their lived experience and knowledge within the guide. Additionally, we formed a steering committee with a group of experts who helped to guide the document. So within the New Jersey Nature-Based Solution Guide and document, we highlight 5 main nature-based solution types. While we understand this is not an exhaustive list of every nature-based solution that exists, we chose these types based on the common hazards that impact New Jersey and making sure that we cover the different environment types within the state, and also covering nature-based solution types where we've seen existing funding and community buy-in for. So we covered bioretention systems, which include rain gardens and bioswales, coastal habitats, which have living shoreline salt marshes, regenerative land management broken up into both working lands and natural lands, stream restoration, which includes dam removal, riparian buffer zones, freshwater wetlands, and urban forestry, which includes stormwater planters and tree filter box. So while there is a table of contents that you can obviously follow within the guide for the different sections, we're going to broadly cover the 3 main chunks the document is divided into. So part 1 of the guide covers information that we believe everyone cracking open the guide should read. While we understand that certain nature-based solution types are only relevant to specific environments, so people living in the middle of the state wouldn't be as interested in living shorelines, for example, really think everyone needs to consider proper planning. So this part one includes best practices and information about planning, including the consideration and coordination with other plans and agencies, timing and permitting, how the community should be involved in decision making and planning, implementing adaptive management practices, and also key information around benefit cost analysis.
So now taking a moment to talk about part two. While part one is there for everyone to read, part two is where readers would go to learn more about specific nature-based solution types. Part two is divided into 11 nature-based solutions profiles, one for each of the 11 nature-based solution types that you saw on a previous slide. What you see on this slide are the different categories of information that populates each of those nature-based solution profiles. For example, if a reader was interested more in learning more about bioswales, they would turn to page 35 of the report and go to the bioswale profile. And the bioswale profile would be divided into the categories that you see here on this slide. Like, where should this nature-based solution type be installed? How can I monitor this nature-based solution? And case studies for that specific nature-based solution. A section that our stakeholders found particularly helpful was the common challenges section, which highlights tips for avoiding common planning, permitting, and logistic challenges, as well as best practices for community engagement and mitigating unintended consequences of implementing those nature-based solutions. Another element of these nature-based solution profiles that is particularly useful are the co-benefits tables. In each profile, we use icons to identify the published information concerning the co-benefit themes addressed by each nature-based solution. These co-benefit themes were developed by a researcher named Jonathan Morizet Davis in 2023 and are commonly used to communicate the co-benefits of nature-based solutions. The themes are, from top left, material benefits like improved human health, the natural process benefits like nutrient cycling management, the habitat services like providing habitat for animals, and the cultural benefits like providing a source of cultural identity or recreational value. Using living shorelines as our example, which can have shellfish colonize these structures along the coastline that filter local water and improve local water quality, this table shows that there are studies that monetize and quantify the water quality benefits by living shorelines that are applicable to the New Jersey area. So, for example, oysters' ability to remove nitrogen from the water was valued at over $1,300 per hectare per year for nitrogen removal. And studies of mussels and oysters in the New Jersey area have quantified the massive particulate matter removed from the water column seasonally by shellfish. So that's just the distinction between monetized and quantified co-benefits. The studies that highlight those specific values are actually in the appendices of the report, which is a good dovetail into part three. Part three of this document represents and has a range of appendices that have even more detailed information regarding each nature-based solution and planning for those projects. We have items that are listed here on the slide, including a checklist for nature-based solutions project planning, bonus profile information, a table of general resources, a table of case studies, all that, some of them aren't in New Jersey, but all are for similar eco zones, a table of existing tools and data that we think would be helpful for readers, and a brief table of funding opportunities, as well as a glossary and all references that are included in the document. Now, just to highlight that this document was designed to be easy to read regardless of a person's expertise in nature-based solutions. That's why we start part one with being the most general information and end with part three having the most detailed and specific information. We hope this structure makes it easy for the document to scan, but also to find high quality detailed information if that's what readers are looking for. And so with that, I'll turn the mic back over to Ashlyn to share some key takeaways from the report.
All right, so we're going to leave you with 3 key takeaways that we think are the most important as we are going through this document. Key takeaway number 1 being, in addition to the existing resources that Janine just highlighted, this reference document includes the expertise of lived experiences and information from experts on the ground. So it's not just only taking things that we found from other publications and resources, but taking these people we spoke to. The second key takeaway is, while this reference document provides a benefit cost analysis 101. Not all benefits provided from nature can be quantified or monetized. While it is important to use existing numbers whenever possible, we do not want you to be deterred from incorporating qualitative descriptions and references to case studies and real experiences that benefit in grant applications. Our third key takeaway is that there is so much more work to be done in the nature-based solution space. These were some gaps that we identified as we were going through the creation process of this document. That we noticed there's a disconnect between permitting and effective project implementation, a lack of long-term planning requirements for nature-based solutions, minimal quantified and monetized co-benefits for nature-based solutions, and that in general, more case study details need to be made public. So we've included everything that we could find from people we talked to and online in this document, but we acknowledge that there's still so much more. So with that, I want to say thank you so much. You can access the Nature-Based Solutions reference document using the QR code above. Link will be in the chat and also on the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center website. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ashlyn and Janine. You came in way under time. I'm very proud of you. Next, I'm going to invite Dr. Brooke Maslow to speak on creating flood resilient landscapes. Take it away, Brooke.
Sure. Thanks, Marjorie. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of the webinar. So I'll be talking about a guidance document that we published last year with funding from the state's Resilient NJ program and some funding from the Rutgers Climate and Energy Institute. And I think it complements nicely with what Janine and Ashlyn just presented. Next slide. So just for context, right, despite being a really small state of New Jersey, we have almost 1,800 miles of coastline. We have almost 6,500 miles of rivers. And so if you look at in terms of flood vulnerability, if you look at that map on the right, that shows you all the 100-year flood zones across the state. And you can see that there's very little, places that constitute higher ground here. In addition to that, about a third of the state's total land area is developed, and much of that is found within close proximity to these special flood hazard areas. And so, of course, we know that flooding and infrastructure don't mix too well. So that results in most municipalities in the state having been affected by flood events. And the risk of flood damage to property is going to continue to increase over time. Next slide. Much of the data on financial and property damage associated with flooding comes from catastrophic events like Hurricane Sandy. Even after a decade, we still think about the flooded New York City subway, the collapsed Manahawkin Bridge, which you can see here in the upper right. And then, of course, the massive flash flooding and things from Hurricane Ida, overtopping riverbanks, those sorts of things. But a sizable portion of the flood insurance claims in New Jersey come from flooding that is not associated with a major storm. There's lots of factors at play in New Jersey, things like sea level rise, land subsidence, significant amounts of impervious cover, and all these things sort of interact, making flooding after even just typical rain events or just sunny day, high tides almost expected in many municipalities. Next slide. And so one way that the state addresses these flood vulnerability issues is by acquiring and demolishing flood-prone properties throughout the state. And this is, obviously a very direct way of getting people out of harm's way and allowing the water a place to go. So in New Jersey, one of the leading initiatives in the state is the Blue Acres program, which is run by the NJDEP. So it's a voluntary buyout program. Funding typically comes from federal sources, and then properties in flood-prone areas are purchased from homeowners at fair market value. Once they're acquired, the land is owned by the state of New Jersey, structures are removed, and the properties are supposed to be managed as open space. The onus of management falls on the municipality where the properties are located typically. Those properties are deed restricted, and they're supposed to be managed again as open space, passive recreation, those sorts of things. Next slide. So when you remove the structures, resilience, right, is immediately increased, right? People and property are out of harm's way, which is a great thing. We can check that box. And for a long time, we thought a lot about the buyout itself as kind of the end game. But after those properties are gone, and the structures are removed, there's new challenges that emerge and have to be dealt with. So, one thing, and I've just got a few things listed here, but one thing is that, there are legacy effects from these previously developed landscapes. They're not inherently resilient. There's soil compaction, invasive species, non-point source pollution, things coming from on-site and off-site into the area, those sorts of things. Then the social side of things, which I'm not really going to talk about too much, but there's a sense of abandonment. Some residents are, stay in the area. Some residents have left, and so you kind of have this checkerboarding of abandonment going on. When you have properties that are not necessarily managed, then they suffer in some cases from inappropriate uses, things like illegal dumping or ATV driving or just folks in having parties or things like that out there. And then from a management perspective, the properties again are owned by the state, but that onus of management falls on the municipality. And so, on the one hand, you've got residents remaining who are expecting kind of this maintained mowed park-like structure. But the Department of Public Works or the other management entities within the municipality can't necessarily always keep up with those demands due to personnel or finances. And so it sort of becomes unsustainable. And so, my group has been working in New Jersey Blue Acres areas. We've been doing that for over a decade. And, at the time that we started this, we sort of realized that there wasn't so much guidance about what to do with the landscape post buyout. And so we've got a group of ecologists, engineers, landscape architects, and we've been kind of designing and implementing these resilient landscape initiatives in these buyout areas for several years. And so this product that I'm about to talk about now sort of combines our academic expertise with our experience-based sort of lessons learned on the ground. Next slide. And so again, this document, Creating Flood Resilient Landscapes, a primer for New Jersey communities, was funded by the DEP's Resilient NJ program, and again, some money from Rutgers. And the goal here is to provide background information and support for communities to understand, why flood resilience is needed in our state, how to go about doing it, and how to fund it. And so this part is a bit of a commercial, I suppose, but I just want to quickly walk through the chapters to give you a sense of what type of content we have here in this primer. Next slide. So I should say also that the format of this manual is meant to be very graphics heavy, very easily digestible, but also to drive home several important points about what's required in creating a resilient landscape. So we have 3 sections to the primer. The first section is entitled Framing the Problem Facing Communities. So here's just a page, it's a 2-page spread from chapter 1, which is aimed at defining flooding, flood types, flood severity, and why New Jersey is so vulnerable to flooding. Next slide. Chapter 2 deals with how we create a foundation for resilience. So we cover basic things like defining resilience. What is it? Understanding the difference between resilience and disaster avoidance. How to assemble a multidisciplinary project team. Who's needed? Who are the players? And then we provide kind of a strategic framework for carrying out these projects on the ground. Next slide. Chapter 3, we discuss in more detail several of the challenges that one might face when creating a resilient landscape. So I mentioned them in the previous slide, but we provide some tips on how you can address some of those challenges. And again, it's not exhaustive, but these are definitely things that come up quite often. Next slide. Okay, section 2, we spend a good deal of time on ecology and the ecological underpinnings of these resilient landscapes. So, our goal here is to get folks to understand how flood-prone landscapes function, right? They're supposed to flood, and how building on them interrupts those natural processes. So here's just kind of a cross-section from chapter 4 that shows you a riverine floodplain. On the left-hand side of the cross-section, you can see the floodplain in its natural state. On the right, it's developed. The bottom labeling on the graphic defines the natural floodplain zones, and the upper labeling defines those same areas, but using the regulatory terminology. And so we have these cross sections for many of the different habitat types that you would have in flood-prone areas. Next slide. We devote another chapter, chapter 5, to the ecological underpinnings of resilient landscapes. So this is kind of my ecology 101. I am an ecology professor. So we discussed sort of the basic concepts at the foundation of ecological restoration, things like biodiversity, how biodiversity contributes to ecosystem function, succession, connectivity, those sorts of things. Next slide. We discuss topics that are related to habitat design. So again, connectivity here, I'm showing you a 2-page spread on the effectiveness of habitat corridors, habitat buffers, hard versus soft edges, and how those interact with wildlife and plant dispersal, and scale. How can you scale up or scale down these different projects? Next slide. Okay, and then section 3 is really practical design and implementation focused. So we provide technical guidance on landscape design, green stormwater infrastructure interventions. So here I've got an example. On this 2-page spread, we're focused on bioswales. Next slide. We then move to a chapter on ecological restoration planning. So here we talk about topics like native species, the importance of native species. And we provide a lot of practical decision support about what to plant, what size containers you might buy when planning these projects. What are the costs and benefits there? How do you define plant palettes that are going to be robust to salt spray and climate change, temperature changes, those sorts of things. And they're all presented again in a really practical manner. Next slide. We also dedicate a chapter to monitoring and maintenance, both before implementation and after. So this one is a post-restoration monitoring and management section. But we discuss things like site preparation, soil amendments, planting and plant protection strategies. And then we end this chapter with a series of graphical timelines to kind of show you the process, for example, of creating and sustaining a meadow or a wetland habitat, that sort of thing. Next slide. And then finally, in chapter 9, we end with why investing in landscape resilience is important. A lot of times, right, we have to justify the need for that funding. And so we highlight several programs that provide funding to support landscape resilience projects. It's not exhaustive, but they're categorized by magnitude, from small community scale projects up to significant federal programs for assistance. And so again, we offer some suggestions there for ongoing projects. Next slide. And so I'll end by saying that this guidance document is available for free in 2 formats. It's available online through our Rutgers Climate and Energy Institute through our website. So you have the link there, and I think we can probably put it in the chat. And then there's also a really much nicer, I think, hard copy version, which you can also have. I have a bunch of copies. So if you email me, then I can send you a hard copy. And with that, I will stop. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brooke. That was tremendous. And I want to let you know that we did put the link in the chat, so folks should be able to find the document. And so now I'd like to invite our final speaker, Dr. Richard Lathrop, who'll present an overview of the New Jersey Restores online web tool.
All right. Thank you, Marjorie and Luke, for inviting me. So I want to talk a bit about some of our experience working with what we call web GIS tools and towards place-based solutions. Next, please. So we first got into this game back in, I guess, 2011. And so our first particular foray in terms of WebGIS tools was something we call NJ Flood Mapper. And so that was launched in February 2013. Next, please. And so this was based off a federal, state, local partnership. So working with an initial application developed by NOAA and the Coastal Services Center, but customized for New Jersey based on input we received from a variety of different coastal decision makers. Next, please. So since that time period, it has continued to evolve, and so I think we're on version 4 right now, and is now part of a broader toolkit, which we call NJ Adapt, hosted by the Climate Change Resource Center and the Environmental Analysis and Communications groups over at Blaustein. But the idea here, in terms of this particular NJ Flood Mapper tool, was to assess vulnerability to sea level rise as well as storm surge. Next, please. Okay. But the challenge is really to go beyond assessing vulnerability to developing solutions. Next, please. So in our general approach is thinking about various kinds of nature-based solutions for maintaining coastal ecosystems, either in place or close proximity. And we think about this kind of like 3 general arenas. One is at that seaward edge, the shoreline, and strategies to reduce that erosion, lateral erosion. The marsh platform itself, in terms of strategies to maintain the elevation capital in the form of vertical accretion rates. And then at that marsh upland edge, in terms of strategies to retain the flexibility for unimpeded landward migration of coastal marshes. Next, please. So as part of trying to develop place-based solutions, there's a diverse coalition of state agencies, non-governmental organizations, and academic partners who've been collaborating on the development of a New Jersey Coastal Ecological Restoration and Adaptation Plan, what we call SRAP. And as part of this, there's a recognition that a number of tools will be developed, but sometimes confusing. Where could you find them? How should you use them? So as a community, we started developing what we call NJ Restores, the New Jersey Restoration Tool Organization Suite. Next, please. And so there's a number of partners. I really think of this as a community of practice. The idea of different groups, from federal to state to local and government, non-government groups, each contributing expertise to the development of NJ Restores. Next, please. So as part of this, we think of this as in terms of part of the organization component is some kind of logical workflow. So first is where to work. And so thinking about areas, again, kind of going from that vulnerability side, but what areas might be most vulnerable, and what changes might be taking place there in terms of then actually then drilling down once you've figured out where you want to work, in terms of what are some of the key issues. And some of this is at a landscape scale. And so we've developed some tools, and I'll talk about those. But the recognition that you may need more detailed in situ information. So there's some tools to basically incorporate that kind of local knowledge. And then in terms of identifying the restoration approach, there's a mix, and you show this on the right-hand side is kind of iterative. And so you might be looking at the shorelines, you might be looking at the marsh platform, you might be looking at that upland edge. And again, some additional tools to help assess the feasibility. So on the left-hand side, we kind of have this vertical workflow, starting from the statewide level and then kind of issue identification and then looking at some actual restoration solutions. Next, please. So this tool and SRAP is part of the state's larger coastal ecological restoration adaptation plan. And then this is a particular planning tool. Next, please. And so SRAP fills this kind of statewide perspective. The state was interested, as well as some of the nonprofit groups, is getting a handle on who's doing what across the state, and then what areas what we call issues of concern in terms of coastal vulnerability, coastal ecological health, social vulnerability, and a number of different issues. And so we went out and solicited a large number of groups to go in and basically nominate. So kind of a bottom-up approach for them to say, this is where we're working, what we have called areas of interest, which are the polygons that you can see on the map, and then particular points, that the red points are actually specific projects. Either those projects could be something planned in the future. We think something should happen here. These might be in design stage. These might be actually in some kind of implementation stage. So we went out and solicited this, did the survey in 2021. And then just recently, we did an update to update that initial database to incorporate new information from our various project partners. So there's different filter tools. You can go in and actually put in queries. I'm looking for projects that are interested in living shorelines and particular geography. And so you can identify those particular projects. Next, please. So I just wanted to give you kind of an application example. This was an assessment of change in the radiative balance of New Jersey tidal wetlands following the implementation of natural climate solution projects. Next, please. So the New Jersey Division of Science and Research, in partnership with Rowan University, basically was embarking on an effort to quantify the fate and flux of carbon and greenhouse gases in tidal wetlands following restoration. So they use this SERAP Explorer, this online tool, to identify potential restoration sites with paired controls for inclusion in this effort. And so just wanted to give you, some example of how people have used these tools. In this case, the SERAP was to help identify a curated list, and that then the other information that was provided in the attribute table helped in terms of issues, concern, land ownership, associated project partners to meet their particular requirements and what they were looking for in terms of project sites. Next, please. Okay, once you have identified an area that you want to work in, now you might want to drill further into that particular marsh area and getting a better handle on what some of the issues are, how it's been maybe altered in the past. And so we have a whole suite of data. So this is under what we call our Restoration Explorer and then our Marsh Explorer tool. And so what I'm showing here is basically all the mosquito ditching, in a particular area of marsh. Next, please. But we have a whole host of different spatial data sets that have been developed by federal sources, state sources, other academic partners, as well as ourselves in some case. But the idea was to be able to bring credible, authoritative sources of information about our coastal zone, our estuaries, our salt marshes, our coastal forests in one location. Next, please. I want to here's another example how the Nature Conservancy has what they're calling their marsh pipeline project. And so in this case, they're trying to identify, assess, and create conceptual designs for salt marsh restoration projects so that they can be taken to final design, permitting, and implementation as resources become available. So the idea is to have a pipeline of projects in varying stages. Next, please. And so to do this, the TNC-led team identified 43 sites and basically using SERAP as part of that, but maybe other criteria, and then using the tools within the NJ Restores to assess edge erosion, platform condition, and future trajectories in terms of what we might expect under sea level rise projections and how that marsh might change through time. Next, please. So for example, again, you've identified an area that you're interested in. In this case, looking at the edge erosion, and that's the map I'm showing here, showing areas of salt marsh shoreline loss. And so saying, okay, I've identified the particular problem. Now the question becomes what kind of solutions might be most appropriate for this location. So when we talk about place-based decision making or solutions making is really trying to bring the best information bear about particular locations. So next, please. So in this case, you might be interested in evaluating different kind of nature-based living shoreline approaches to that particular shoreline. Next, please. And so in this case, bringing information produced by our colleagues at Stevens Institute, John Miller and his crew, where they've looked at what are some of the engineering constraints related to different kinds of nature-based living shorelines. So in this case, showing 6 different living shorelines, and then looking at, in terms of this case, the tidal range as one of the potential constraints, and under which conditions, which shoreline technique might be most appropriate. Okay, next, please. And so basically, we've mapped all the underlying parameters and then assessed the shoreline for the entire state in terms of the tidal shoreline, the coastal shoreline, and then assessed for each small grid cell, and that's what the map I'm showing here in terms of, and then at a particular point, this is all web-based online system, interactive system, so the user can go in, click on a point, and then get some idea of which techniques might be most appropriate. For the particular example I have on screen, it's saying, well, in this case, nature-based living shoreline, only 4 parameters are met. Marsh sill, only 4, living reef breakwater, not so good. But in terms of the ecologically enhanced revetment, actually, 6 parameters, 6 out of 7. So this might be the most appropriate technique for this particular location. Again, this is a starting point that you would then go in and do more site-specific information, and some of the other tools, the watch tools and the other tools, may be most appropriate then to provide local site-based information. Next, please. We also looked at this from another perspective in terms of breaking up New Jersey's coastal salt marshes into what we call marsh units. So these are contiguous areas. You can think of them as kind of planting areas of up to 300 acres in size. And then in each of these marsh units, we've assessed their alteration status in terms of their ditching and open water management and potential marsh loss for whatever reasons. So in this example, I've got a particular marsh unit highlighted. Next, please. So next, yeah. Okay, so this brings us to the next tool in terms of the Marsh Futures tool. So, we've talked about the shoreline. Now, if you're really interested in the platform itself, the actual marsh, and it's keeping up with sea level rise or not, okay, the Marsh Futures tool allows us to do different kinds of scenarios. Next, please. And in this case, looking out to 2050, that's kind of our future time horizon. The user can go in and look at different levels of sea level rise. And so basically a scenario, I'm going to, in this case, using a low rate of sea level rise of about 1/2 foot. And then looking at the accretion rate that you might have. And again, there's different choices. And this is the natural accretion rate. And then finally, what we call a thin layer placement of dredge spoil. So in this case, this is the actual potential management technique that you might do to enhance the vertical accretion on a marsh. Next, please. And so part of the tool, the idea is to be able to, the user can interactively look at, in this case, again, this is a baseline. I'm using 1 foot of sea level rise, a base of 3 millimeters per year of accretion, and then no thin layer placement. So I want you to look at the map and you see there's a lot of brown. Brown basically says tidal flat. So this particular area, out of 2050, we're using what's called a SLAM model, basically suggesting that we could lose marsh and conversion to tidal flat. Next, please. If we actually added 3 layers, 3 inches in terms of a thin layer placement, you can see there's less brown, more green. Okay, so basically enhancing that vertical accretion may help in terms of maintaining the marsh. Next, please. What if we put 6 inches of accretion, in terms of thin layer placement? Here you can see the marsh is all pretty much green. And so, using this tool, you could look at different scenarios of thin layer placement to see how, whether it be useful or not. It's not an all or nothing tool that useful everywhere, but in this location, it seems like it would make sense. In addition, we also estimate how much volume it would actually take in terms of dredge spoil for these different thin layer placements. And that's part of the information. If you actually click on that marsh unit, it has that there. Next, please. So some closing thoughts. Continued sea level rise and extreme weather events are a threat to both our coastal human as well as our natural communities alike. And so web-based GIS tools such as Flood Mapper provide access to critical place-based information to assess coastal flood exposure and potential vulnerabilities. Next, please. And then solution support tools such as NJ Restores have been designed to help coastal decision makers translate place-based information into concrete action plans. We're still in the early stages of employing NJ Restores. It's really just been built, and we're learning as we do so. Next. But our experience suggests, again, over the last 15 years of working in this area, that for WebGIS tools to be truly effective, they really have to be integrated into a broader decision support system that includes substantive professional outreach and person-to-person interaction. So we build these tools, but it's really part of, again, a larger support network. And in terms of the NJ SRAP and NJ Restores, the future, what's coming down the pike in terms of climate-ready New Jersey, that effort includes a lot of this, person-to-person interaction in terms of outreach. And so that's something that we are planning to do over the next several years to assess communities and various groups in terms of applying these tools. Next, please. And so to access this, you can go to njrestores.rutgers.edu. And again, thank our partners and our funding partners in terms of NOAA, NJDAP, Nature Conservancy, and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. That's it.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lathrop. That was just really terrific. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers, and I'd like to invite all of you to turn your cameras on and join us for the Q&A. We've had a very active set of questions, and Lucas has been monitoring them. And so I'm going to look to Lucas, who's been following your questions in the chat, to kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Marjorie. Okay, we're going to go back to some of the other questions we got. We have a question for Brooke from Stephen Morey. Are the state purchased properties removed from municipal tax rolls, do you know?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Because they become owned by the state of New Jersey, and so then they're removed from those tax ratables.
Okay. And a follow-up question from Virginia Lamb was they weren't aware that the state-owned public properties were maintained by local governments. Does the state pay the local governments for this in any way?
No. So my general understanding is that the management comes, there's a memorandum of understanding between the state and the municipality in which the properties are located. And, early on, it was more of just needs to be managed as open space, deed restricted, no permanent structures, no piping, those kinds of things. And then it was really up to the township to sort of determine what is meant by maintain. And so I think there are a lot of places where really not much is happening. So just, nature takes its course, so to speak. And of course, there's things like invasive species and just general, vegetative growth and stuff like that. And then there are other townships that take a more proactive role in terms of maintaining either mowing or doing some type of ecological restoration or public, community enhancement type projects in these areas.
Great, thank you. And one other question for you, Brooke. Pat Noble brought up an issue where they're working on a rain garden in their township, and I was curious about how government should provide public information feedback on these projects to the public. So, do you have any advice on how local governments and the public there can be good communication about projects that may be ongoing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the scale of the project. I mean, small scale rain gardens and, public libraries, for example, or schools and things, I think there can be some kind of communication at that scale of those types of things. If it's a more township-wide rain garden initiative through public meetings or local newspapers, those kinds of things. But I think, yeah, just the communication of what is happening, what the benefits are, and and why it's happening really are promote that sort of buy-in from the public.
Great, thank you. All right, next question is for Ashlyn and Janine. Gina, I apologize if I don't pronounce your last name correctly. Weinscheitein wanted to know for the nature-based solution guide, if you could tell more about how the project got started.
Yeah, of course. So as I had mentioned during our presentation, we had worked with the Nature Conservancy New Jersey. So originally they had approached us of wanting to make a guide that kind of addressed some gaps. The conversation really started around benefit cost analysis and just how this is an important part of getting funding and getting applications in for nature-based solutions, but also how there's a lot of big question marks around what does this involve and what needs to be done, especially since it is very, economics heavy, and not everyone has that background. And then it kind of grew into, well, what is the kind of information that is out there but is not necessarily the most accessible? You think about it's hard to know what to search when you don't know what you don't know. And so part of why we are making this guide is to then put all of that kind of information into one place. Because the biggest thing is Janine and I weren't necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel. We were just trying to make it easier for people to have access to this information in one area. So then they can go down their rabbit holes and start branching off and find other information and resources to help them understand what they need to do to implement or learn more about nature-based solutions.
And I will just add that there are, like Ashley said, a lot of resources out there, and there are some federal level guides that do similar work, but we were really focusing on making it applicable to New Jersey. So that was another lens that we put in, and to make sure that the nature-based solutions that we were highlighting address specific hazards that New Jersey is facing because of climate change.
Thank you. Another question for you both from Fatima Oliva. Do you know of any New Jersey municipalities who are currently using the nature-based solution reference guide for resilience planning?
We don't know right now. We haven't had any feedback like that, but we have included municipalities in the development of the nature-based solutions guide. So we hope that it meets that need of giving the information that as Ashlyn outlined it, but I haven't heard from anybody directly that they're using it.
Yep.
Thank you. Next question, back to Brooke. Abigail Smith asked, since the main mechanism is to buy back or purchase land to restore for nature-based solutions, what mechanisms are being used to get homeowners to participate? Are they normally willing? Are the homes being purchased for their current value?
Okay, so that's a bunch of questions. So, typically what happens with the state is that they are, targeting areas where there's been repetitive losses. So, repetitive loss properties. There's usually communication between the state and the municipality, but it is a homeowner-based buyout program. So the homeowner themselves has to apply for, for the buyout. And so in terms of promotions and things, I mean, I work in Woodbridge Township, and they've been doing this for almost a decade now. And when Hurricane Sandy came through, there was a big push to purchase over 160 properties in Woodbridge Township, and there was a big on-the-ground canvassing effort by Woodbridge Township and its community partners to sort of promote the program and to get that initiative rolling. I'm sorry, what was the last question?
They wanted to know about the homes were being purchased at their current values, and if homeowners are usually willing to participate.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, they are purchased at fair market value, and so that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. One more, Brooke. We've had a few comments asking about people who live in more urban and suburban areas of the state where a lot of the land is already paved over. Are there any suggestions of what citizens in those areas can do in terms of these types of solutions?
Yeah, so I think it's just a matter of scale. I think we were just having a conversation about street trees prior to the webinar starting, and any green infrastructure project, big or small, can be done. So whether it's planting a small urban lot or putting in pollinator strips, or green streets, those kinds of things. I think all of that can contribute to climate-based solutions, whether it's, reducing the urban heat island effect or increasing infiltration or reducing erosion, increasing shade. I think it's just, folks can do what works in their space that they have. And then, as you do small demonstration projects, if you will, right, those sort of add up as you look and you sort of zoom out to the larger and larger scale.
And Brooke, one last one, sorry. Do municipalities have to approve a Blue Acres purchase?
They do, yes. Yeah, the homeowner submits the application, but Blue Acres and the municipality have to go back and forth, and yes, they do approve it.
Great. All right, we're going to switch over to Rick now for a few questions. First question, Rick, is from Lois Cleo Bacchini. They ask, can Restoration Explorer be used for river and stream flooding?
Right now, it is focused on coastal applications. We have a separate project which is called Watershed NJ, which is in some ways similar, looking at stressors and then potential solutions or improvements. So that's in development right now. Whereas the NJ Restores is coastal focused. This new tool will basically head upstream and work with the freshwater portion of our watersheds.
Great, thank you. And that should also address Mike Pizarro, your question about whether it addressed inland restoration possibilities. The Watershed NJ would be the solution for that. All right, next question. They actually had a few about upland and drier sites, which would all be Watershed NJ. Pat Noble asked, are these programs promoting crowdsourced solutions to data collection, such as public awareness of the MyCoast application associated with the Jacques Cousteau Research Reserve? They've seen less public activity in MyCoast, and there's a lot of focus on static camera placement.
Yeah. They're linked through, I guess, NJ Flood Mapper incorporates the MyCoast application. And so in that respect, but not so much in terms of there's no connection at this point to NJ Restores there. So in the broader suite of tools, yes, but in terms of the specific, and again, we're continually building this out. And so as we come up and hear about particular user needs or the like, we try to respond where it makes sense.
This question I'll actually answer. Tyler Kinney asked, are there plans to integrate the updated STAP sea level rise projections into NJ Flood Mapper? Yes, there are. The STAP was just released about a month ago. So we're currently working with our development team to actually integrate those new values into the NJ Flood Mapper tool and update our total water level tool to incorporate that information as well. Next question, this could be either for Rick or for Brooke, from Hannah Chang. In general, what difference would there be between barrier islands and inland areas? They assume probably rainfall could be the same, but storm surge or tidal would be different.
You mean in terms of flooding, I guess? Yes, I mean the source of flooding, sure. You can still have, tidal freshwater wetlands and things like that inland. So and you can have flooding coming from just large amounts of impervious cover as well. So I think it just depends on what the land use is in that particular area of where a lot of the flood waters are coming and the elevations.
Yeah, so a lot of the flooding data kind of like our flood map or flood plain data integrates both rainfall and riverine flooding and potentially coastal flooding. It doesn't necessarily differentiate between the two. It's kind of a total, I guess the kind of that total water level approach.
All right. Brooke, Danielle Blanco asked if there opportunities to incorporate more local industries in habitat restoration and maintenance. For example, seafood restaurants will have their seashells recycled, or in some locations they recycle coconut fibers. Are there any other industries of that could help assist with resilience projects?
I think that creativity is key. So I think that any community-led initiative to source those products, I think would be perfect. I think in my experience, the funding of these different projects, these implementation projects that we've done has come either from the municipality or from the corporate partnerships, you know, in existing programs, I guess, already to sort of channel their funding towards various projects. There's also, you know, we use a prison-based, so prisoners in a system in South Jersey run a native plant nursery, and so we source some of our plant material through a program that's run through that prison, which is also another creative way of sourcing material. So I think that there's lots of ways that we can accomplish these goals.
Some of it is supply and then demand. And so from the SERAP side is to know in terms of particular municipality, what projects people are interested, you know, and who's pursuing it. So in terms of on the demand side, where you might need some of these various materials, whether it's dredge spoil or, you know, in terms of coconut fiber for, you know, shoreline restoration, you know, if someone, this they can go on the site and see who's working locally and then be able to try to make those connections in terms of, you know, who are some of the project leads in their community.
Great, thank you both. Brooke, this one's for you from Most Bob. You kind of touched on some of this in one of your early responses, but they are working within the hospital systems, and they're basically asking if there's basically potentiality to employ nature-based solutions within the health system to benefit patients as well as the health system overall.
I think that there are many co-benefits to just folks being out in nature, whether it's you know, tangible things like air quality improvements, to sort of that mental health and cultural aspect of things. And so I think you can cast a broad net in how you define nature-based solutions, whether you have you know, external gardens and other landscape interventions in and around the hospital landscapes. Yeah, I think there are lots of ways that you can provide those benefits to patients for sure.
Great, thanks. The next question is open to everyone. Margaret DeMarco asks, what can zoning board members do to push the integration of these insights into zoning rules? So whoever wants to jump in first there.
Zoning rule. I can talk, you know, one area I didn't talk a lot about is what's happening at the upland coastal edge. And so partly what the tool allows you to identify those areas that are existing green space, but might be future flood vulnerable and or future salt marsh. And so those are areas, you know, to identify that these are particularly, we expect to see change in the future. And so developing those areas now are going to diminish future resiliency, coastal resiliency. So those might be areas when thinking about zoning that might receive some special consideration.
Does anyone else have a response to that question? Because we're starting to run out of time, so I didn't know if anybody else wanted to.
We have one quick thing.
Just to kind of reiterate the part of Rick's response about thinking long-term. So nature-based solutions today are, if the goal is to make them last a while, requires long-term planning and thinking about long-term planning horizons. So really making sure that you engage your community, making sure that whatever zoning changes you do choose to make reflect the desires of the community, not only today, but into the future.
Great. So I also want to quickly say that for those of you who have said that you want hard copies, you're going to have to email Dr. Maslow personally, because she'll need your information, like where to send it. So just sending us your email address and putting it in the chat isn't helpful. So I put Dr. Maslow's email there, and you can find her without too much trouble also by just Googling and going to her website. So thank you.
Yeah.
Lucas, I think we can ask one more quick question.
Sure. I'm going to ask one more, and then I'll just state too, if any of your questions were not answered, please feel free to email to us, and we'll try and follow up with you as well. Last question is, are there opportunities for volunteer or youth-based, such as AmeriCorps or other conservation groups, to participate in planning and implementing nature-based solutions? I'll leave that open to the group. Go ahead, Janine.
So I can't think of, because we wrote this document and published it over maybe 11 months ago now. I can't definitively say what opportunities are available. I do know that various urban areas do a lot of tree planting activities. I don't know if it's specifically through, did you say AmeriCorps programs, but I know their tree planting tends to be the thing that is the easiest for community groups to engage in because it's a very clear cut, please come help us dig a hole and put this tree in the hole. But there are probably other opportunities that are more integrative, that you can start from the planning process and then, decide where the trees go and then also participate in the tree planting. But that would apply to other nature-based solutions. I'm sorry, I don't know any off the top of my head right now.
But
But
I can just say, just because we're running out of time, I think the New Jersey Environmental Digital Library has a listing. There's Tyler put something in the list here also, but the New Jersey Environmental Digital Library has a listing of all of organizations in the state that are environmental organizations, and many of them are land conservation, land trust. And my advice would be to get in touch with somebody that's local watershed association. The Watershed Institute has a list also, and those groups will have you find out where your local organization is, and they will have opportunities all the time that you can address. So I think that's where we are. We're kind of, I'm sorry to cut you off, Janine, but we're out of time. I just want to say that thank you to Dr. Lathrop, Dr. Maslow, Ashland Spector, Janine Barr. The resources discussed by our speakers can be found online and through our website, and a recording of this will be available in the next days on the Climate Change Resource Center website. And thanks to Dr. Stringham. So thank you all for your time and happy holidays.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.